little bit about who we are. We're standing here, Rodrigo and I work for an organisation called Forum for the Future. We're a sustainability NGO, or a non-profit, depending on what country you're in. We work with businesses and public sector organisations globally to help solve those kind of intractable problems that they can't solve alone. We bring about lots of coalitions to kind of break down the barriers to change. They've got as far as they can on their own. They come to us, we facilitate bringing people together to actually solve those tricky challenges together. And we work with organisations that you might recognise, but also people like yourselves, the kind of actual doers in the room to help make that happen. So we're a little bit different in that we believe there's a real sense of urgency, that we need to ramp up the scale and the pace of change, that we need to work on these tricky problems that you can't solve alone, because we've got as far as we can on our own, and we have to do it together. We use a process called system innovation, which is essentially a beautifully technical word for working together on the things you can't solve alone. There's more to it than that. I will get shot for dismissing that. But basically just a little bit about the kind of the theory behind what we do is that we believe that what we need to do is focus on the fact that we've already experienced the need for change. We're already seeing kind of really negative things happen in the world, but also some bubblings of the more positive, and we'll talk about those trends in a minute. We need to kind of work out where we want the system to kind of be, how we want to fix it. We need to kind of come up with these what we call pioneering practices, so the little kind of islands of excellence, the really amazing examples of how the world could be a better place. And then we need to help that spread, basically, and that's what that diagram says. So we work with big organisations to do that. Now, how do you design for an unpredictable future? Why do we do that? Why do we help people to do that? Well, we believe that some things are pretty certain, and usually these are the things that people kind of bear in mind when they're designing for the future. And it's things like, you know, we know that in the future we'll feel the pinch. We know that in terms of disposable income in our particular part of the world and in the US is going to go down. As a proportion of things that of income people can spend on kind of the more frivolous side of things, we know that's going to go down. So we need to design bearing in mind that people will have proportionally less of their income to spend on these things. We know that aspirational markets will exist. We know that countries like India and China are already aspiring to have the kind of lives that us here in the middle class in the Western world already have. And at the moment that means having a lot of stuff. That means having your big TV. It means having your big SUV. It means having, you know, your mobile phones. And that, coupled with the fact that we're seeing the trend in, you know, we're depleting our resources. We're running out of certain rare earth metals. We're also running out of, we're using the Earth's resources at a pace that is too great to be able to kind of build that set of resources back up at a natural rate. So if we're already using the equivalent of sort of, well, in this country, 3 planets worth of resources per person, if everyone was going to live in the way that we're living, how do we let aspiring markets aspire to have a lifestyle that doesn't require all of that stuff? Now, if those aspiring markets actually want to live in a way that the US lives, per person, we'd actually need 5 planets worth of resources. So how do we create the aspiration to live a lifestyle that doesn't require more than we've actually physically got? We'll need to ride the digital wave. This is kind of, I love this picture. We're pretty certain that the generations to come, although the digital gadgets that they'll be using will be different, they will have a digital edge. They'll be enabled by digital technology. And it's all about kind of recognizing the power of that digital for good. So I don't know have any of you come across O-Power? Yeah, like it's pretty cool. It's basically harnessing the power of social networks and recognizing the fact that people are very much influenced by the people around them to essentially save energy. So if you can see your neighbour's energy bills, and you can see that their energy bills are radically lower than yours, but they're living in the same model of house and there's the same number of people, wouldn't that make you go, whoa, how did they do that? I want lower bills. So it's kind of harnessing that power of that, and it's digitally enabled. We know that inequality will likely get worse, and we're not talking kind of just on a global scale, we're talking here as well. This is, what charity is this? Is it
children.
Yeah, anyway. No, it's a really well-known...
Save the Children.
Save the Children.
Yeah.
So this is their first campaign that's focused on this country, highlighting the fact that inequality is just getting worse in this country in terms of the gap between the rich and the poor. That for the first time they feel they need to focus on poverty explicitly for families in this country. So we know that that's unfortunately for the short term, we know inequality is going to get worse. And that's not just in terms of kind of wealth and extreme poverty, it's also, there are different types of inequality. And they have different effects. And I hate this photo. I don't know about you. I mean, how comfortable does this make you? The fact that, you know, we have 1 billion hungry people and 1 billion obese people. And it's phenomenal. We also think that it's fairly likely that the shared economy will rise. That resource kind of constraint that I was talking about earlier on, and the fact that people will have less of a disposable income, will probably, or more than likely, actually mean that you will be more likely to share the goods that you use. We'll make better use of what we have, be more efficient in our use. And this is just quite an old now, from a year ago, Airbnb graphic about the exponential growth. And you know, Airbnb is fundamentally about making good use of empty space. So that's, you know, we believe some things you can predict. And most people are pretty happy with that. I mean, you've probably seen all those trends before. Kind of got, you know, you've kind of known them, you've read about them, you know. And you know, when we design stuff, be that strategy, be that products, services, business models, experiences, most people have a kind of forecast of, we think this is the way things are going. But actually, there are other things that are just not quite as predictable. Have you seen these quotes before? The one about the computers is actually really common. I see that quite a lot. I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers.
Well done.
And that's, yeah, he kind of undersold that a bit. And you know, the fact that Warner Brothers didn't think that you'd want to actually hear actors talk. And now where are we? And then obviously kind of slightly timely one with Maggie Thatcher deciding that, you know, in her lifetime there wouldn't be a woman prime minister. So there are some things that we just can't predict. And you know, there's lots actually that we can't predict. So how do we design for that unpredictable future?
Now my bit. So after hearing from all this different information, I think what I'm going to show you is what we do with it and how we work with it, what kind of techniques we have to use futures. No? First of all, I'm going to start with our innovation process, and this is a pretty standard innovation process. So the first stage is challenge. What we do there is a bit of research, lots of different interviews, and start to understand the picture, a bit of diagnose in the system where you are. And the second bit is inspire. And inspire, you condense all the information you get and start to create different stimulus. The stimulus could be things like, I don't know, scenarios, could be PDFs, could be videos. The idea with all this is to start to create a different world and help people that are going through the process to understand the future in a completely different way. The third stage in our innovation process is create. So let's say you have all these different stimulus, and I'm going to show you in a bit some of them. And you're in a workshop, but how are you going to use them? No? So we use different techniques like design thinking, applying like human-centered research, but also people, personas, brainstorming, rapid prototyping, and the idea here is to generate as many possible concepts that could fit that scenario you have. And then we go to build, which is the part where you create with those ideas a concept, but more like thinking about the business model, thinking about the prototype, a beta stage. You start to test it with the user, and then we go to scale the final bit, which is make it mainstream and connect with people. So that's the standard process, but the ingredient we add is basically futures, no? So about how we use future is a structured way to explore what could happen. But I think I must say, like, we don't predict and we don't forecast, because there is no way, as Anna just showed, like, you will be able to know what is going to happen. And there are so many different things that could happen, but it's important to know, like, the impact and the uncertainty are something that you have to know and deal with it. Long-term trends. So that's the first thing we do, and we have loads of, a big amount of information with trends where we can show big things that could happen, and especially thinking about resource scarcity, things like all of us we know. Also, we use emerging trends, and we call them horizon scanning. What happens when you start to mix all the different trends and you see the possibilities of all the things when you start to mix? The ambitions is quite inspiring, and from a design perspective, I have a design background. Is the way when you stimulate the most people, no? Because they start to think from a different perspective what could be the future for them. And the final one, scenarios. And the scenarios, you start to mix all the different worlds. You create a world, and almost like a narrative story, and you help the person that is going through the process to imagine a different world. Helps a lot to creativity, because then you move from here to somewhere else, no? Far in the future. So why we use them? They create new perspectives, better ideas, joining up and building consensus, and also creativity and innovation. The process is very engaging, so that helps people to connect and to start to own what are you doing. Because you understand the big picture. It's not only about, like, creation of a natural response. So I'm going to show you Futurescapes. I love this project. It's one of my favorites. We partnered with Sony like a year ago, and basically what we asked, and the question, and I think the important thing here is, Sony was asking this question: what's the role of technology in helping people live more sustainable lifestyles, like in 2025? The interesting for me is, like, there's an organization at least is asking this question. Yeah, probably they could have many different issues as many others, but the important thing is how you start to wonder and explore what's the role of technology and how technology could help or not our lives. So what we did is went through the process and created 4 different scenarios. These scenarios are hyper-innovation, centralized survival, shared ownership, and strategically defined. The important thing here, they need to be very different worlds, because each of them is going to push you in a completely different level. For instance, let's say hyper-innovation is a world where technology is pretty much solving all our problems. It's a low-carbon world, thanks to technology. And that means also our addictions and the way how we are always looking down and never actually interacting in a different way is due to the lack of human interaction. On the other side, this one is completely the other side. It reconsiders the part of well-being, what we mean with quality of life, and different values. So therefore, you can have access to all these resources, are Creative Commons, so you can download them, use them, and also, get to know them a bit better. So we can tell you a bit about it. So basically the videos start to go and develops a timeline of what's happening, different events, and explain you how she arrives to this part of her life. And she starts to tell you a bit of one day in her life, what kind of things she does, and explain what are her interests. Showing a bit of how she interacts with technology, how she interacts with her children, what kind of values are important for her in her life. This is one of the elements that is part of this immersion. So as Anna was saying, we use them to start to know, like, the uncertainty is something that you almost need to embrace it. You need to embrace ambiguity, because there is no real clear picture. You know? And we use these kind of things, but also like illustrations, PDFs, infographics, things that help people to start to imagine a different future. So I'm going to stop it there. It's quite cool because that one is her. Do you remember the name? What's the name of Tai Chi? Digital Tai Chi, and she's all about well-being and creating a different way of living with her parents still. And in some other worlds, they change the way how people interact. So I'm going back to the presentation.
Quite funny, she has kids in that one.
Yeah.
Then in another one, you see it where, in the one where all interaction is through digital, and it's kind of very much still focused on your individual device. She hasn't got kids, and there's this kind of one beautiful image of her sat next to her husband, and they're both on their computer and they're not looking at each other.
And saying, I have a great relationship.
And it's just kind of, it's to sort of just show that different perceptions are perfectly possible. That might be seen as the way to live in the future. We just not.
Yeah. So part of the process is very creative. We bring around like scientists, technologists, developers, web designers, industrial designers, product designers, service designers, lots of different people to start to think about, okay, we have all this information, we have all these trends, and then we have really crazy wacky concepts like a personal guru or data Lego, and things that this one was a fantastic digital bonfire. So the interesting thing is the ideas were quite like out there. And then what happened after that process is we filter them in a way like we select these 4 elements: a platform, a product, a place, and a philosophy. And the video is not going to play, but I'm just going to leave it behind so you can see a bit of what are they.
So we use the scenarios as stimulus to that kind of interesting random group of people in workshops.
Yeah.
And the idea is that people will use a scenario and think, right, what's the unmet need there? What products would work in that scenario? And then they kind of come up with all these beautiful ideas. But then the ones that are more likely to work are the ones that then, if you test them in other scenarios, they also resonate. So then you're designing for multiple different futures. You're designing products and services that make sense for unpredictable futures, essentially. If you can find ones that work.
Yeah, and the idea with some of them, they might work in different scenarios. And that's obviously a stronger idea, or a stronger concept. So the first one is a product, and this is a mobile phone for your lifetime. Well, the idea here is like, what could happen if, imagine if suddenly you have a mobile phone that is going to be modular, it's going to be upgradable, and also you're going to develop an emotional relationship with it. The second one is place. It was like previous one, and then this one is IOTA, a platform. It's an academy for teach kids how to code, basically, and with all the Internet of Things movement. And the final one, a philosophy, is basically more a question about when is going to be enough. When actually we're going to have enough from all this relationship we have with technology, and when the line is going to stop. And I was thinking of it like, think about mobile phones. The last 5 years they have been stuck, and they are black boxes, no? All of them. No? Which one is more innovative, iPhone number 5 or iPhone 1? What do you think?
1.
Exactly, no? Change the market, change the way how the people interact. And I think the interesting thing for me is like, actually, probably mobile phones at the moment are like what could happen with the bicycle 100 years ago. The bicycle had this evolution of design, and now basically it doesn't change. It's pretty much the same structure. So probably what could happen if the mobile phone is just going to arrive to that moment where it's going to be a black box anyway, you know? And just stay there because that's how we use it. So you can see all the information in our website. We could share that with you if you are more interested. So now we're going to move to the one bit where you ask to do something a bit different that what you normally do in creative mornings. And what we're going to ask you is to divide in groups and with these two questions, see how do you use your visions of the future in your work? How can you use them in your work to design for an unpredictable future? What we want is everybody have a chance to talk and share what are their thoughts. What do you think about all this different information? And we have a beautiful pro forma that Anna is going to show you just now.
So there's 3 questions.
Yeah.
So how do you use those visions? What other techniques have you got to help you design for unpredictability? And then how do you wrap that up? How do you kind of stretch it into the long term? How do you make sure that it's not just creating more incremental innovation? And then, you know, just to help you think, you can draw yourself. Because it's a creative one.
Yeah.
So if you can get in groups of sort of
3,
4 or 5,
4,
maybe, just
yeah.
come around.
So you working with one group, you can be another group. The front line, yeah. What about that? How was that? Did you enjoy it? Yeah. Who wants to share a bit of what kind of conversations you had?
Who's got a technique that they use that came out in their conversations? They want to share.
Yeah, here it comes.
Go on, be brave.
Come on.
Well, one thing we were saying is instead of just talking about your visions, doing them. So like bringing the future and the present.
That's kind of cool.
We work with people every day in our organisation, and we co-create with them. So that's about the future, the fact that young people are our future. It's making sure you're actually involving them in the stuff that you're creating for them.
Okay, nice. Co-creation.
I had a lot of conversations about going back to people, kind of real needs, and getting to understand what makes people tick, not just incrementally, and fundamentally.
But what we picked up on was the idea of people's unmet needs that might be met by thinking about the affordances of past technologies. So my friends here are very interested in letterpress typography, and what is it about that which people might embrace in the future? Is it about craft? Is it about manufacturing? Is it about quality? And if you look at things like vinyl records, have had a resurgence because people either like the quality or the experience of record shops and that kind of thing. So there are sort of elements of unmet needs that, or people can do so much more digitally that they want to do things which have a more kind of physical component to them. That's a technique.
Well, one more.
So building on that, looking at alternatives that people have in their past. So Heather works with kind of graduates in recruitment and kind of talent acquisition businesses, and looking at different paths that people can use to get to a particular spot. So apprenticeships rather than going to courses and that.
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Baffles me, this assumption that you all have to have a degree.
Well, great.
Okay.
That was good to hear.
Yeah.
So please, after, just give us back the pro forma, because we're going to share it with you. We can then publish it.
Yeah.
But I think we have lots of really interesting insights in each of them.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much.